If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to the show, visit earmarkcpe.com/FPA. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Finally, if you enjoy listening to FP&A today, please go to your podcast platform of choice, click the subscribe button, and leave a rating and review of the show. And now, on to the show.
From Data Rails, this is FP&A Today.
Welcome to FP&A Today. I'm your host, Glenn Hopper. Our guest today is Jason Hershman, a seasoned finance leader and entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience driving growth and strategic success in hyper-growth companies. Jason's career spans an impressive array of accomplishments, including leading a $400 million sale of Appetize, a B2B SaaS business in the sports industry, spearheading IPO initiatives, raising and renegotiating millions in funding, and integrating acquisitions seamlessly. But beyond transactions, Jason sees himself as an operator, where he uses finance to manage companies to their potential. Following the $400 million sale of Appetize, Jason left to start his own fractional CFO business. He now works exclusively with startups in the broader sports industry and is the operating CFO to a number of exciting businesses in the space, spanning sports media, startup leagues, beverages, software, and others. He loves being part of the broader fractional CFO community and wants to inspire those who have a finance background to apply their finance skills to things that light them up. Jason, welcome to the show.
Glenn, thanks for having me. Wow, what an intro. That might be the kindest thing anyone has ever said about me.
It's funny. I was talking the other day, I like to go on podcasts just to hear people say nice things about me, it's an ego boost immediately.
Yeah, that was incredible.
I did love the last bit there about applying finance skills to things that light them up. And we talked before the show, and we're going to get into this, but finding the ability to do that early in your career is such an amazing thing. Everybody that listens to the show, we all love our, finance and building models and doing all that. But if you're doing it in a cause or a business or an industry that you love, it just makes it that much better.
For sure. It's part of your identity, who you work with. And if that aligns with who you are, whether you're creating the product or doing finance for the product, I think makes all the difference. And in my experience, a lot of finance people feel kind of like trapped, like they have to do finance, they have to do accounting, without realizing that every company in the world, the companies that they love the most, the products that they wear, use, talk about, all need finance and accounting. Took me a little bit to figure that out, and I'm hoping to kind of shine the light on that and share that with others and encourage them to do the same.
And what I love that you said yesterday before the show when we were talking is that you will turn down, if somebody comes to you that's not in your wheelhouse of where you want to focus in your fractional CFO business, you're not taking that kind of business because you know exactly where you want to be working. And I think that's great. And that to have the discipline, because you could do it in other areas, but it would probably take the fun out and you'd lose some of that passion.
Yeah, for sure. I talk to my wife about this all the time. It's a privileged place to be, to kind of like pass leads off to other fractional CFOs. But, part of the reason I'm doing this and why I'm out on my own is to build something that I want to build, that I want to be a part of, that, gives me excitement, doesn't drain me. And there's a lot of priorities outside of money that are important to me, and I like to think long term. So maybe in the moment it stings a little bit, but I know that if I stay disciplined, consistent, I can build something that I'm proud to be a part of, proud to say that's mine, and proud to work in on a daily basis. And like I said, aligns with who I am and lights me up, gets me excited, and that's just what I got to do. And that's why I'm out on my own a little bit.
Yeah, love it. Well, I guess let's dive in, because I want to walk through your career journey to how you got where you are now. And something that was very interesting, and maybe not even related to the rest of your career, but can you walk us through your career journey? And I want to go back to your time with the Philadelphia Eagles all the way to now where you've founded Point. And I guess, within that, kind of how you ended up moving into FP&A from that. And you might say, oh, the Eagles don't have anything to do with it, but I still want to, I want to hear the background all the way back to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely like the coolest part of my career, I would say, growing up in the Philly area, the Eagles are everything. But, as I reflect on it, it actually had a huge kind of impact on how I go about my career. And let me explain. When I got that job, I was maybe 14 years old. And my parents told me, hey, you're going to be in high school. I was going into freshman year in high school, and they're like, you got to get a job this summer. You can't do anything, or you can't just do nothing. And my thought was, okay, well, I don't want to just do anything. All I want to do is work for the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is early 2000s. LinkedIn wasn't a thing. Facebook was like, didn't exist. You couldn't just Google anyone or get in touch with anyone. And I kind of just like hacked the internet a little, and I found one phone number to call the Philadelphia Eagles. And sure enough, it was like a receptionist in some random department. And I must have called this lady every day for 6 months until eventually she forwarded me, 3 months in, she forwarded me to the equipment manager. 3 months after calling the equipment manager every single day, he brought me in. He said, hey, you want a job? I said, yes. He's like, how about you be a ballboy? You'll live with us for the summer. That's when they did training camp kind of away from Philadelphia. And you'll come to games and work the weekends. And I held that job for 4 or 5 years, and it was amazing. And I loved it. I loved every moment of it. And how that has impacted me in my career, and specifically what I'm doing as a fractional CFO, is like, I just, from a very young age, learned that like things that are seemingly out of touch, out of reach, are not. It just takes a little hustle, a little effort. I apply that kind of like rigor to when I'm trying to go work with a specific company or get in touch with a specific person. And it's been very foundational, and it has put me in positions, situations, interacting with people that, maybe someone who hasn't had that like Philadelphia Eagle experience would think is not even possible. And now I just look at every opportunity as, well, that's possible. I just got to put in the dedication, the consistency, and the effort. And so it actually has had a very like meaningful impact on my career.
That's great. That's great. I'm just picturing you finding this number, dialing it in, and then, someone picking up the phone. This is Donovan.
Exactly. We had house phones. And I remember when we like finally got the job offer, I wasn't at the house. My mom picked up our house phone, and I didn't find out until my mom told me when I got home. So, different times, and that's how it works. You say that. I had Javon Curse as my voicemail, and all my high school buddies would just call me all the time and get upset with me when I would answer and not, my voicemail. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you've had an idea and a focus and kind of out of the box thinking and a drive early on. So that sets the stage. So now walk me through post-college, your career there.
So sure. Studied finance and supply chain management in college. And I did some finance internships, your typical internships, worked at JP Morgan. Truthfully, I did not love my internships. And so it was a very sexy time to be an investment banker. That's all anyone wanted to do. Michael Lewis's books were blowing up. The financial crisis happened in 2008, and we were all like, starting to graduate college, and people were just like obsessed with being investment bankers. And I felt like the oddball, not having interned there and not wanting to do that. And so I wanted to find a way where I could apply finance and supply chain management to my actual career. And I was looking for something smaller, something where I felt like I like actually understood what I was doing and the impact that was having. This is when like Facebook was blowing up, Google was blowing up. There wasn't like this like startup culture. Like startups weren't, a thing that people tried to find. And so I found this company on Craigslist that was doing the international e-commerce for every US retailer. And they were hiring their first finance guy in New York City. And I was like, oh, New York City? That's where I want to move after college. This thing is e-commerce. So you buy things online. They ship it to you. That's supply chain. And they're hiring a finance person. So I applied. It was a one-room startup, got the job. And it was just like a huge learning curve for the first 6 months. So I got the job, started, And the reason I got the job was because I wanted to avoid investment banking, and I ended up working investment banking hours anyway for a lot less money. But it was very, very educational. Like, I learned the intricacies of accounting. I set up all the accounting, all the financial operations. There was no like cloud software, so it was a homegrown accounting system. I had to do the journal entries. I had to work with the engineers to make sure our systems were capturing transactions correctly, everything. Set up the accounting. And after like 6 months, I became the expert on the numbers and the results. And people started asking me how we did and why. And I started explaining things. And then I started saying, like, here's what we might expect next month, next quarter, next year. And I started putting together all this in Excel. And before I knew it, I was like learning Excel and building a financial model, talking to the CFO and CEO every day. And without even realizing it, I kind of started understanding FP&A. And through the experience of, one, getting the expertise in the accounting and the numbers, two, the influence with FP&A, and three, watching this company grow, I kind of like really got a firsthand seat on the power that finance can bring to a young, growing business. And I would say, like, hey, here's what we need to change in our pricing, or here's what we need to change in our product, or let's go get partnerships with this carrier in Japan to lower our costs so we can increase our sales. And I started like using finance to really just like kind of manage the company to its success and lead initiatives to its success. And we would implement these changes. And I started measuring the results of the changes. Was that a success or failure? And what we could do to kind of like tweak it. Long story short, this company grew, we acquired businesses, we implemented systems, and eventually we ended up taking it public. So from the very get-go at this first job, I kind of got the full span of what finance could do at a startup, and I was hooked. And that's how I knew, like, from there, this was like the career path for me. And also I learned a ton. So I just was armed with this knowledge for the rest of my career. And that has really shaped kind of what I do now, how I run companies, how I think about it, all those things.
Yeah, and that's you and I have a very similar background in that, because I spent most of my career as a CFO in the startup space, and it's, I got an MBA and a master's in finance, but nothing nothing teaches you like just being in a startup where you have to wear every hat in the company, and there's no one to pass the buck to, so you have to go figure it out. And I think such a valuable experience, and it makes you, if you're doing that earlier in your career, you understand not just, technical accounting and finance courses, you understand what an income statement is and what a cash flow statement is and all that. But in a startup, while you're looking at your burn rate and you're, seeing the impact of all this, you understand, the importance of the balance sheet and the cash flow and all that. And and then also, oh, by the way, you have to know these systems because we don't have an IT department yet. And you've got to, get everything communicating and talking to each other and running these reports yourself and everything. It's a serious learning experience.
Yeah. Like in school, whether undergrad or grad, sure, you learn accounting. You probably learn Excel, you learn financial models, you learn what a balance sheet is, cash flow statement is. But in this experience, you learn how everything is connected, how those statements quantify pretty much everything that everyone is doing, and the purpose of those statements. Why people look at a balance sheet, to know that if this much AP due and, this much AR coming in, and how they might manage that on a month to month basis. You learn like why this number on the P&L is the way it is and what decisions are reflected in that. And so in that experience, even though you're doing journal entries, you're doing financial operations, you're chasing AR, you learn the importance of it because you know where it's going to land on the financial statements, and you know what that all means for the business.
So you go from the startup goes public, and you move on through your next career stops. How did you go from there, and then to Appetize and the experiences you had there, and then ultimately deciding, I've done this in several different companies. I want to try now this fractional CFO, FP&A as a service business. How did you kind of evolve into that?
Yeah, let me bring you up to speed here to where I am today. So company went public, was fully vested, longest tenured finance guy at the time, wasn't really sure what to do next. So I went to business school, got into a really good program at Cornell University, did that. And following business school, I was still young and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I got recruited by a Cornell alum to come into a larger consulting firm. He said he was starting up a CFO practice. It'd be very similar to what I did at the startup, except more dollars, more people, and quite frankly, he was offering me a lot of money and I was young and I figured, all right, this actually sounds pretty cool. I did that for 4 years, learned like the model, how to sell yourself as a finance person. I built up a great network of private equity professionals. But after, 4 years, I quickly kind of like realized that I belong in a startup. I'm seeking that opportunity again. At the same time, I was getting married. I was done with traveling and didn't want to be away every week. And in my personal life, I was just like working out every day. I'm a big marathon runner, endurance athlete, working for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm into sports. And I kind of just like was like, what can I do that's going to really excite me where I can also apply my skills? And so I looked for a sports startup that I can work with. And I got hired as the head of finance under a CFO at a B2B SaaS business in the sports industry. And it was awesome. Loved it. And what I did there was I just, kind of ran the same playbook. They had a controller. And so I was kind of more on the FP&A side, but I rebuilt their financial model. That was the first thing I did. And using the financial model, I kind of started telling, hey, marketing, we need you to generate this many leads every single month because that's going to impact the pipeline in this way. Sales, we need you to close these deals this quarter. So ops, we can get these, we sold to stadiums. We can get these stadiums live and we can start triggering revenue recognition. That's how this model works. And here's kind of like the budget for everything. And here's how many hires and all of that. And in the background for several years, I was kind of running an M&A process because this was kind of right in the COVID area when stadiums were empty and people were like, wow, you got an awesome business, but like, we don't know if people are coming back to stadiums. So we were in this M&A process. COVID happened and it kind of just drew it out for 2 years or whatever. Finally, the acquisition happens, super successful exit. And at that time, after the exit, I was kind of like, all right, I got this itch to do my own thing. The only way I know how to make money is finance for startups. And I kind of want to stick to the sports and fitness industry. So let me just like go to market as this like CFO. And I'm going to just like specifically target, sports and fitness startups. And sure enough, to my surprise, there was a market for it. And within, 6 weeks, I was kind of off and running, had a number of clients, and was just working as their fractional CFO. And that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years now.
FP&A Today is brought to you by DataRails, the world's #1 FP&A solution. DataRails is the artificial intelligence-powered financial planning and analysis platform built for Excel users. That's right, you can stay in Excel. But instead of facing hell for every budget, month-end close, or forecast, you can enjoy a paradise of data consolidation, advanced visualization, reporting, and AI capabilities. Plus, game-changing insights giving you instant answers and your story created in seconds. Find out why more than 1,000 finance teams use DataRails to uncover their company's real story. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Learn more at datarails.com. I love what just comes naturally to you. You're much younger than I am, so you haven't seen this kind of evolution firsthand like I have, but you speak very proactively about the modeling and what you're seeing. And I think early in my career, the CFO, this is going back to say about the time you were with the Eagles, was probably my first finance job. And thinking back then, the CFO role felt very backward looking. And it was a passive role that was, you tell me what you want. I can do whatever kind of financial report you want. You want ratios? I'll give you ratios. You want this? And then the rest of the management team would take what the CFO gave them or not believe what the CFO gave them and then go do whatever, make their decisions. But really over the last, we'll say 20 to 25 years, and I've got a whole tangent I'll save for another day, but I really think Sarbanes-Oxley and Enron and sort of the CFO shifting and having to, sign the financial statements and sometimes be the adult in the room. I really think that this kind of led a lot or maybe accelerated some of the change in the CFO. But when you talk about you're building the model and what you're saying, and then you're going proactively to whether it's sales and marketing or operations or whoever and telling them, hey, look, we've modeled this out. If you do X, Y, Z, we're going to see these results. And I think that that's where the real value comes. And I think that leads to my next question. What sets Point, your FP&A agency, apart from maybe a traditional provider in offering those high-touch fractional CFO services?
It's a great question. And to be honest, I'm sure there's like a ton of really good fractional CFO services out. But let me try and answer that question with following your logic a little bit. So I think, and this is a hypothesis of mine, and you could tell me I'm wrong. But like when you come up studying finance and accounting out of school, I would say 80% of the people think that the only path is, Deloitte, EY, PwC, KPMG, investment banking, right? And that's the path. And these are all financial services. These are service providers that are external to companies. And so what they do is they just make sure that the numbers are right. And I think when people like start their career in that path, they kind of just like get so hyper focused on the numbers. You tell me and I'll get you the numbers type thing. Whereas I kind of didn't go that way. I kind of first like jumped head in and companies were like, we need to know the numbers. And, it was a little bit of my personality where I'm not great at just like, even like when in my first job, I was just like sitting there saying like, here's the information. I kind of get, a little too involved, which has helped me and hurt me a little bit. But like I was putting together the numbers and I wasn't going to do it for no reason. I would say, okay, like, why do you need this for? What do you need this for? And let me help give you the answer to that question. Here's maybe a solution. That's my hypothesis on that like transformational shift. How I might separate myself. One, I like to tell my clients that you never know that we're not full-time. I know a lot of fractional CFOs, they're like, you meet with us once a week, twice a month, whatever it is. My service isn't like that. And then similar to what I did at Appetize, what I did at that first company is I view finance holistically. And so if I'm building the model, I'm doing it in a way that, this is going to be able to track information the way that everyone is talking and thinking about the business. This is going to be able to answer everyone's questions and also let me align the GL with that. Let me this is all in harmony, right? So let's reconfigure the chart of accounts. I'm not just sticking to FP&A, but let me reconfigure the chart of accounts so that we're tracking everything in the same way that people are discussing about it and making decisions, right? And so people use the products that I'm creating, the P&Ls, the forecasts, the models, to actually make decisions, to refer to it, to kind of assess what went right, what went wrong, to give the company a valuation, to go out to raise money, to hold people accountable. So it's starting to be that the clients I work with, finance makes sense to them. I'm able to explain it in a way that they think, in a way that's useful. I don't know if that differentiates me, but that's one thing that I'm pretty proud of. And then also simultaneously, if the GL is aligned one way, well then sales, your CRM's got to track, new clients in kind of a similar fashion. Marketing, you got to give me the reports in the same way. Headcount, we got to make sure each department is lined up with how we want to track it and see it in the general ledger. So I'm not just touching finance, I'm coordinating functions across the business to align with how I know that people want to see information, use information, make decisions. And so whether that's a differentiator or not, that's just how I run my business. And I think I have good client satisfaction. So
Again, I love you saying this, and I can't say this everywhere because of the groups I talk to, but because we are on FP&A today, not CPA today, I'm going to go ahead and say this here. We're we're going to keep it within the FP&A community. But so historically, the path to CFO was CPA, audit, Big Four. Go through and do just the very strong accounting focus. You are seeing in recent years more and more people coming up through FP&A into the CFO's seat. And I think I always said, as a CFO, I was only as good as my controller is, but I didn't want to do any of the work that the controller was doing.
Yeah.
And, I would, if I had to come in and talk to the auditors, it was, that was not where I wanted my focus to be. And I never, very young in my career, I didn't want to go get the CPA. I didn't love the debits and credits of it. I wanted to do the modeling and all that. And I think your approach is what the modern CFO is doing. You have to have, depending on the size of the company, you have to have that chief accounting officer, and you have to have people that, make sure that your base foundational GL is right and accurate. But beyond that, where the CFO's office brings value, like that's table stakes, and that's more and more what's being automated. But where you're adding value is, I'm not just giving you the reports, I'm giving you my strategic insights, and that's where we're adding value. And it sounds like that's what you're doing with Point as well.
Yeah, exactly. I never took the controller role. I do think I'm very good at accounting, but I know that there's CPAs out there that just know more than I do. And I have two controllers that work with me that are amazing. And honestly, I probably couldn't do what I was doing without their support. Now, what I like, the way that I assist them is I say hey, here's the AP process. Here's how we're going to set it up. Here's what we're going to do. Here's kind of what I need from you. And how they help me is, I'll say hey, if we wanted to track something this way, is that how would you set that up in the general ledger? And they would be more of the expert on well, this should be a natural account. This should fall under here. Let me go create the account. They would do that stuff. And also, if I'm trying to decide, is this a cost of sales or is this an OPEX? Is this something that we should amortize, or does this just get immediately expensed? They have really good insights on the proper treatment of certain things when it's not so clear. Now, I don't think you could do the CFO and even probably the FP&A job without some sort of concrete foundation in accounting. And I actually think FP&A teaches you a lot of accounting, because you kind of start to understand how things move through the financial statements. But it's for sure a different job, a different skill set. And to my point earlier, it's not 100% necessary if you want to be the CFO to go down that path. And to my point earlier, sometimes it's detrimental because of the way it shapes your thinking early on in your career. I had a LinkedIn, sorry, I'll stop after this, but I had a LinkedIn post recently where most of my clients come to me because they're not getting what they need out of their accountant. So it's not that they don't have accounting, it's just they need more.
Yeah. And, being in that startup space where you are, it's funny because I'm not doing as much fractional CFO work now. I'm a lot more focused on the tech, sort of the fintech, everything from software systems to analytics and AI. But most of my fractional CFO clients, because I'd spent so much time, not always in the startup, but in the SMB, say under 25 million in annual revenue. That's where most of my career has been.
Yeah.
A couple bigger than that. But I got so many clients that came to me who I would be the first actual finance person they had. These are people who who had a tax accountant and then as the business got bigger, they were trying to get their tax accountant to do FP&A for them. And the tax accountant, all they're trying to do is minimize your taxable income. And they're like, I guess I build you a budget. I don't, that's not what we do.
Yeah. Tax accountants, they're trying to minimize income. FP&A is trying to tell you how to maximize income. Obviously there's a need for both. A really good tax accountant is a really good resource, but I found traditionally that's best to outsource, and I don't know, it does not fit the CFO role in the same way, just because again, they're just so focused on how to minimize taxes and not how to maximize revenue, gross profit, whatever metric it is that you're going for.
Oh yeah, so many of them, and one of them just jumps out right now. And this is I won't go too far down this tangent, but it was a company that their tax accountant were very good, and every year at the end of the year they would say, "Wow, you're sitting on so much cash. You need to distribute this. You need to prepay this and do all this," and they would dump all the cash out of the business at the end of every year. And then this company renewed their biggest software platform that was $500,000 or more a year, had to pay an annual, like in February, after they just dumped all the cash out of the business. And it took, you come in and you see things like that. And that's the difference between, the audience here knows, but the difference between the tax accounting and FP&A was, how about we look at it this way? Maybe we can change the contract. If you want the cash out of the business at the end of the year, we can do this. Or we could go to quarterly payments. We could manage the cash flow better,
Right.
all that. But
they're focused on the 12/31 deadline, which is some ways a little arbitrary when you're running a business for multiple years. I get that you got to report and you got to file taxes, but it's not always the best strategy to follow a tax accountant's advice when operating the business.
Thinking about operating the business, one of our favorite topics here, and for all FP&A people, is financial modeling. And you said earlier, I really hung on to that when you're talking about when you would model it out and show, that you would have a message to give to sales and marketing and operations or whoever. But let's dig into that a little more. And like, how do you approach financial modeling to align it with kind of those strategic goals and inflection points in a business?
I would say the most work that goes into a client is like the first 90 days when I like to rebuild the financial model from scratch. And it teaches me a lot about like the business, how the chart of accounts is set up, how people think, make decisions, how the business works, how the business makes money. And through that process of like showing people what I'm building, how it looks, feels, how it works, how accurate it is, I just learn about how people want to see information and what information is actually important. One of the realizations that I came to early on as a fractional CFO is when you're spread across different businesses, you kind of focus on what matters. When I was doing FP&A for a specific company, I could forecast every single variable, make sure it gets updated with actuals, all that. But then you start to realize that like maybe those variables aren't that important and don't need to like muddy up the forecast. So you start just having a number of conversations and people start thinking about the business in terms of geography, in terms of product, in terms of variable SKUs, how they price things differently from either one service to the next. And you start just like really understanding, okay, these are the key things and how we should probably set up the P&L and which revenue streams we should use. And then COGS should mirror revenue. And then OPEX, like which departments, what things should we break out in OPEX that are super critical. And from the P&L, once you get that, you kind of create a skeleton of a P&L. And then you can kind of walk backwards. You're like, okay, if I were to forecast this revenue, what would I need to know? Well, all of these metrics now need to be broken out by the different revenue streams. And so it just becomes the model becomes uniform to align with how people need to see the P&L, how people think about the business. And then as you start thinking about how am I going to update this? How am I going to pull in actuals based on this way? You start saying, okay, is the general ledger set up to track information in this way? If not, what do we need to change? Do we need to change the chart of accounts? Do we need to make sure that every revenue stream that goes on the books gets, booked with certain attributes? And if so, how do we ensure that in each of the systems? How do we automate that in each of the systems? And then you start thinking, okay, now that I have actuals set up for it, how do I get forward-looking information based on this? And you start asking the marketing team, the sales team, hey, can you design this report in this way in your system so I can use this as a key input? And sure enough, after maybe 6 months, the whole company is thinking about everything in the same way, using the same reports that are like filling into the model. And FP&A doesn't become this aggregate reports, create presentations type thing, but it's like, hey, this person's leaving. We're filling these roles. This we just got this in the pipeline. What would happen if this didn't convert this month? And it becomes just very easy to refresh, tweak, give people answers, to operate on different circumstances as things change, to compare it to a budget. It just becomes super simple and also a lot more powerful. So I think that answers your question on how I think about building the model and its impact on the business.
Yeah. And, what I love is, so there's that Warren Buffett quote that or accounting is the language of business or whatever. So to your point, to do good FP&A, you have to know accounting. And then thinking about what we provide, where our value is to the business. I say, you're an FMVA, right? From CFI?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking, I am too. And it's funny, I went and got mine way later because I felt I'd been a CFO for years and I got nervous that I wasn't spending enough time in Excel and my team knew so much more about it. So I went back and got that certification later. But it was a great reminder for me in thinking about, like, you're talking about the impact of one transaction or somebody leaving the company or whatever, the impact it has on the model and how it kind of flows through all the financial statements and the impact there. And that's where the domain expertise is so important. And I think, there's more and more is automated. And obviously I talk about AI and machine learning and automation all the time. But for the time being, that kind of domain expertise and that insight that you bring is where finance is going to add the best value. And that's that it's more than just human in the loop. It is a human at the wheel. You can use all the tools and technology to help you with that. And I'm sure, we all spend most of our time is in Excel right now. Some of us, you can do stuff in Python and other platforms, but really the most of the modeling to this day is still done in Excel. And there's add-ins, like Data Rails and others out there that you can integrate directly into Excel and get some more power out of it, or Power Query and Power Automate and all the Power BI stuff and everything. I mean, there are new tools, but they're not going to go do this work themselves. And I'm wondering, so you're working with different clients, and I'm sure they have different ERPs, different GLs, different CRMs, and all that. So you have to kind of be technology agnostic when you come in the way you approach them. When you come into clients right now, what role does technology, and I mean the financial systems, BI tools, and all that, what does it play in when you're doing the modeling or even trying to scale FP&A functions? Like, where is that intersection with technology for you now?
I am very similar to everything you just described, where most of it all comes together in Excel, for better or worse. And I know I need to get better at that. And it's one of my areas of focus for 2025 is how can I apply software to the whole process of aggregating everything in Excel. Now, what I will say, putting everything into Excel and aggregating it for me is not painful. And here's what I do. Regardless of what general ledger, what CRM, what payroll system I have, I know what the inputs should look like. And I go as far as all these softwares, you can design your own reports in them. So I know every payroll system has last name, first name, title, department, salary, start date, end date. Every payroll system has that. Every GL has account number, account, whatever it is. So I design all of those inputs, save them as inputs, and anytime I need to refresh it, I could just download it, pop it in. And so regardless of what software stack each client's using, I just gotten really good at knowing what works well as an input, and I can use it. The magic, and this is why I like Excel, the magic is how are you going to forecast the P&L? How are you going to make it look? You can design it, make it look, forecast it any which way you want, and grab those inputs in the same way. So that's kind of how I approach the technology is I have standardized what inputs look like for different components of the P&L, the balance sheet, whatever. That's how I approach it.
I'm sure you kind of have your template and you have where you drop in all your inputs. And are you doing index match or Power Query, or how are you populating the models?
I find that if I'm using a complicated formula, I'm not laying the data out correctly. I should not be filtering data in a formula. I should be filtering the input before I grab it. So if I need to grab it from two separate inputs, then that's on me. I like to keep it simple. Keeping it simple in the formulas, even though I can write complex formulas. I wrote some terrible looking formulas. But the problem is they're hard to follow even for advanced people. They're not easy to update. They're hard to audit. So I I am constantly questioning myself if I'm not using X lookup, sum if, plus minus divide or multiply, then I need to lay the data out in a different way. And that's kind of how I try and keep myself in check.
Yeah, I think about that too. So going back to my days of modeling, thinking about like you end up with, so many tabs in the spreadsheet, but linking to other spreadsheets and you're emailing them around and somebody breaks a formula on one of them and you've got a version control issue and thinking about how complex, the massive nested if statements and crazy things going on that, when you have a team of a bunch of people who are really good in Excel, it's almost like you're trying to, outdo each other with how complex your formula is. But then to your point, you have explainability, you have, how, you got to tell the auditors what you're doing here and all that. So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. And I don't link workbooks because of that issue. Like if I need to compare to the budget, I take an output of the budget and I put it in my model and it's a budget tab and I can link back to that tab in the model. So yeah, I do everything I can to make it stupid simple. I design all the reports in the financial model. So I'm never like every quarter updating this report. It's just updating as I update the financial model. So try and keep it simple.
Yeah, do all the groundwork early, and that way you're just
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
One thing that I'm wondering, and people ask me this all the time, so I always like to get inputs from people, especially in the fractional world where you're dealing with multiple clients and multiple software and everything. But I guess the first question, are any of your clients asking about it, and secondly, are you currently using any kind of AI or machine learning? Do you have a feel for this? Are your clients asking about it? Do you see, do you have a hint or an idea of where you think this might be going for FP&A, the AI and ML, I mean?
Yeah. And this is something I want to talk to you about. I'm very behind on this. If I'm using AI, I don't know about it. Now, like if I'm using Ramp or QuickBooks and they started implementing AI and it's made something a little more seamless or simpler, then great. Like that's awesome. If it's embedded in the product and it's like a new feature and it's just something like that I log in, I'm like, oh, this is nice. Then maybe I am using AI, but I'm definitely not purposely using AI to apply to my situations right now. So I'm behind. And maybe you and I can detail some use cases and how we might go about using AI. But in preparation of this meeting, specifically for FP&A, I think there is a use case in financial modeling more on saving time and less on removing the individual from it. So if I were to build a financial model, a lot of 90% of it will be the same, like how OpEx gets spent, how headcount gets done. The difficulty comes in that last 10%, how things get tracked different amongst different companies, amongst different business models. And so I would love for like AI to kind of take a URL, www.companyx.com and, identify this company is, a SaaS business and their P&L should probably be set up in this way. And here's like kind of public information about it. So we can kind of estimate these things or maybe fill in the blanks or maybe not. Maybe just create a SaaS template specifically for that company. And I think AI should and could be able to do that. And then I think it's important for a person, because I haven't seen AI get good at this, is getting specific. Like right now, I can put in ChatGPT, write this email for me, but it won't be specific. You'll need to tailor it. So I would love for AI to get that 80% done, a person to improve the model with specificity, right? And design it, give it back to AI and say like, hey, here's the model. Here's the GL. Here's other information that you need to know. And maybe even like tell it what to do and produce like kind of results, outputs, maybe charts that might be relevant. And so the way I would see AI most immediately in FP&A, and again, I'm not the authority on this. I'd love for you to tell me that this is wrong, right? This is too ridiculous or too easy, and I'm kind of behind the curve, is AI, human, AI. And you made a point earlier that I agree with, is that human in the loop is critical. Like when I build the model, like I'm learning about the company. I'm able to learn about the company and then leverage my experience, which maybe AI has or doesn't, but I'm able to combine what I learned with my experience and give good advice, opine on good procedures, all of that stuff. I would hate for people to think that AI can take this end to end and not spend the right amount of time learning how things work in the company in order to like advise the company properly.
Yeah, and that's what you talk about. This could and maybe should be its own episode of FP&A Today, where we talk about very very specifically. This is how you can use AI in FP&A. But the human in the loop right now, I say human in the loop, but really it is the human is driving. AI is in the loop, but the way that I treat AI, and you can get it to do some amazing things, from Monte Carlo simulations to variance analysis to some really good insights to and forecasting, doing complex forecasting methods. You can do all this with AI, but it's not on its own. So everybody's talking about agents, in 2025, and that may happen, but the idea that you just tell AI to do a task like you would a human being, and it goes off and does it and comes back. I, Everybody from Microsoft to Salesforce, everybody's talking about these agents. Nobody has delivered it yet. Technology is moving quickly. Maybe we will see it, but for right now, I treat AI like a very, very bright but very, very green intern. And to your point on specificity, if you're the domain expert, you know what you're looking for in the knowledge that the AI has. There's something buried in there. You can get it out of it, but you have to drive it and you have to coax it, and it's not going to go do it on its own. And you have to know the pitfalls to keep it from hallucinating and be ensure that it gives you correct information. And yeah, honestly, that might be a fun episode to do. And we would have to lean into video. We couldn't do it all just on audio, but we'd have to do like a screen share and video. But we could really break it down there. And I'd love to go into it more today, but we're getting close to the end of time, and I've got a couple more questions that I want to hit you with that we get that we ask everybody. So let's put a pin in that, and that might be fun. I'd love to have you back, and we could figure out a way to do an AI breakdown of how it works in FP&A.
Yeah, for sure. That would be educational for me, and that's one thing that I look forward to learning from you this year.
Great. Okay, so let's go into these. These are a couple of questions that we ask all of our guests. And the first is, and it's, we dove straight into the professional work. So we always like to touch on the personal side a little bit. So what's something maybe that not many people may know about you?
Well, one thing is like I'm a pretty dedicated marathoner. I'm not like an Olympian, but I ran 2:46 on my last marathon, hoping to break 2:40 on my next marathon. So when I have a race, I stay pretty dedicated. Fitness is a big part of my life. Competition, I love it. So that's probably one thing that maybe my current audience doesn't know about me.
That's great. I'm a marathoner too. It's been a couple of years since I did my last one. I'm getting older and I'm beat up all the time. I've had two Achilles surgeries, had hernia surgery this year. I'm probably getting into too much information on this episode, but I'm
I've had every
2.5
too, so that's how you know you've been doing it a while.
Yeah. I'm doing a half coming up in a few months, and I'm doing an Olympic triathlon in May. And so I do what I can. It's way slow. And even at my peak, my best marathon I ever did was 3:27. So I wasn't even, you were finished and showered and like having lunch by the time I got
done. Hey man, to each their own. I love that you're doing it, and would love to do a race with you one day.
Oh, that'd be a blast. Yeah. I guess, okay, so we could talk about, that's a whole other episode too, is our endurance sports episode.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Excel function and why?
Oh man, I don't think I can live without like some ifs. Like it aggregates data. If you set up data right away, it can serve as an X lookup. It can count, it can add. You could probably, use it in multiple different ways, and it's also super easy to understand. So it's like probably the most powerful, most useful function that I use.
Love it. Love it. Well, Jason, I don't say this to all the guests, but I'd love to have you back on the show. I think maybe doing our AI episode might be something fun we could do. We'll look at doing that at some point in the near future. And I love what you're doing. I love your focus and approach to FP&A and the passion that you have and the way you're able to take your business into an industry that you really care about. So kudos on all of that. Before we let you go, how can our listeners connect with you, learn more about what you're doing at Point, and if any of our listeners are in the sports industry in particular, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Thanks for having me. I'd love to come back on. We're going to do an AI episode together. Please send me some homework because I got to get up to speed on this. And truthfully, got to get up to speed on it. So to the extent that you could educate me on all this, I'd love to try some things out and see where it goes. Appreciate you having me. Would love to come back on. If anyone out there, sports industry or not, wants to follow me, the best way is hit me up on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Jason Hershman. My business is Point if you can't find me, but should be pretty straightforward. I'm kind of out there in the open. So
yeah, we'll put all your contact info in the show notes too, so people will be able to reach out to you. So, Jason, thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Talk to you later.